Hey everybody, welcome to another The Hockey Writers season preview. For the first time this year, I'm your host, Jacob Billington, joined by Matthew Zator, who is going to be talking about the Canucks today. You've seen a lot of him if you've been watching all the season previews. But Matthew, how you doing?
Doing good. Being on the other side here, it's an interesting position, but yeah, happy to talk Canucks and excited for the next season here. We're only a few weeks away from training camp. Well, actually, pretty close to training camp, and yeah, I just want hockey to get started here again.
I hear you. It's been a pretty dry summer. I mean, I guess in terms of news, we've it's been pretty busy, but um, just definitely missing the summer or the hockey. So let's just get right into it. The Canucks had a very busy offseason. Kind of underratedly, people think of the busiest off seasons. They think of the Predators. They think of the Florida Panthers. They don't really mention the Canucks, but a lot of big names out, some big names in. First name that came in was Jake DeBrusk. What are your thoughts on that deal?
I mean, I love it. I mean, the term was a bit long for me, but you use that term to get the cap hit down, and his cap hit's not too bad. I mean, he's a guy that could potentially be part of this team for well, he did sign a really long deal, so he should be part of this team for a long time. Hopefully it's not the same as the last time the Canucks got someone from the Bruins, and that was Louis Eriksson. Everyone knows in Canucks the nation that wasn't a very good deal. He only was productive for maybe one season, and then he was an albatross of a contract for the rest of it. I don't feel like DeBrusk's going to be that way. I think he's got the style of game that's going to thrive in Vancouver, especially on a Rick Tocchet team that likes his type of game. So I think he's going to start with Elias Pettersson on the second line, or if you want to call it a 1B. I think he's a guy that could potentially fit with Pettersson. At least everyone's hoping he will, because that's why he was signed. Patrick Allvin said after he was signed that he anticipates him to play with Pettersson and be a guy that could be his duet partner like Besser and Miller are. And it would be great to have another dynamic duo like that. Top line with Besser and Miller has clicked. Probably it's been the last few seasons where they've been really good together and they've played most of their time as a duo. So if they could get a DeBrusk Pettersson to click that way, that's great because then they've got three duos with Joshua and Garland on the third line who really clicked together last season. So I really like the signing. I think DeBrusk really fits. He could potentially be a 25, 30 goal scorer. I'm not maybe not the 30, but at least 25. He's done that a few times in his career. And he's going to bring a lot to the power play. He's pretty physical. He's a big forward. And he's got some speed too. So I think he's going to be a really good fit for the Canucks. And I mean, yeah, the money's a bit much and the term's a bit much, but if he's productive and then the money's fine. I think he's going to be good here.
Yeah, I think it's a risky deal. I mean, he has great possession numbers. His underlying stats are fantastic, but he's only surpassed 42 points once, or twice. I think his rookie year he had 43. There's a lot of risk in it, but I think it's one that will pay off. Like you said, if he can click with Pettersson, that'll be a great deal for them. Um, Moving on, another forward that they signed, Danton Heinen, another guy out of Boston. What are your thoughts on bringing him in?
They seem to just want to get Boston, and then Boston goes and takes guys from the Canucks too. So, yeah, I like Danton Heinen. I think he came out as a tryout PTO from Boston last season and really thrived there and in his second go around with the team. And he's one of those versatile guys. I think he can play in the top six, he can play in the bottom six, and be good all around. I'm not sure where he's going to start. He's probably going to get some auditions with Pettersson. He's probably going to get some auditions with Miller and Besser. Maybe even the third and fourth lines. I don't know. I think he's just going to fly around the lineup to see where he can fit. But he's one of those players that's really good on the forecheck. He's got some, again, speed. He's been able to. I mean, he's not a big scorer. He's not a 30. He's not going to be hitting 30 goals, but I think he can be a 20 goal scorer for sure. And again, add to the penalty kill. Maybe be on the second unit power play. I really see him as another like Niels Höglander type player, where he'll be able to score, but not be the big time guy, but add to the team in different ways. So again, a great signing for me. I feel like he's just, again, another type of player that's going to fit with Rick Tocchet and his system. And that seems to be a pattern throughout all the signings, that they're all guys that are going to play well in what Tocchet's going to bring. So I like the Heinen signing too.
Yeah, I like it as well. And I mean, $2.25 million for 2 years. That's not much of a risk. It's a good value for somebody. I think with Pittsburgh 2 seasons ago, maybe 3 seasons ago, he did hit over 20 goals, which was, he had a great season. And then it was weird last offseason because he had like a handshake deal with the Bruins
Yeah.
to join the team once they made cap space. And it was interesting, but now he gets locked up for 2 years. And somebody coming from not Boston but wears similar colors is Kiefer Sherwood out of Nashville. What are your thoughts on bringing him in? I mean, 2 years, 1.5 million. I personally think he's going to fit really well with somebody like Dakota Joshua. Could make a really difficult line to play against. But what are your thoughts?
This is probably one of my favorite signings because it's very under the radar. And in fact, it's like, oh, this is a guy that comes in. But he scored last season too. It's not a guy that just scored 2 goals. I mean, he had double digits. So I mean, it's not like this is just not just a banger on the third and fourth line. I mean, he can. This is the guy he's going to be doing that. He led. I don't know if he led Nashville in hits, but he was up there. He had 245, I believe. He's one of those guys that just he'll throw his body around. He'll be in the same hit totals as what Joshua was. And Joshua would have had even more if he wouldn't got injured. He would have had over 300 hits. But Sherwood's just, I think, another Dakota Joshua. I mean, they brought him in a few seasons ago under a really low contract, and now he's, of course, getting paid a lot more. But I see Sherwood as that same type of player, but he's going to be playing probably on the fourth line to start. Although he could also play with Garland and Joshua, but then there's no center on that line. So you kind of, I think Sherwood's going to be playing on the fourth line. But he has the potential to score and, of course, bring that physicality. And he's just, he's very tough to play against. That was one of the reasons why the Canucks signed him. Alvin even said, this is a guy we were really annoyed to play against him against Nashville, and he always stood out. So we're just went and signed him. And I think Quinn Hughes said the same thing about him. So they said, well, we're going to have him on our side this time. And I think I'm going to love him on the Canucks because he's, again, one of those guys that'll fit with what Tocchet brings as a coach too. So,
well, and him getting to Vancouver is a similar path to Dakota Joshua as well. Like he's spent 6 seasons in the NHL, parts of 6 seasons already. And last year is the first time he really played in a full season. And he got 27 points in 68 games. So he's going to probably get more of a chance in Vancouver now that he's proven himself a bit. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic signing for all the same reasons. Daniel Sprong, one of the most efficient players in the NHL, 20 goal fourth liner, 1 year, $975K. What are your thoughts?
This is I keep going back to this, like a Pius Suter type, last minute August signing that just comes out of nowhere. I mean, the Canucks had done nothing since July 1st. And then all of a sudden this Daniel Sprong signing comes and everyone's like, okay, it's very low. I mean, very low risk. I mean, a 1-year deal. He's a guy that's going to, like you say, very underrated guy that plays in the bottom of the lineup, but can still score close to 20 goals. And every place he's been in, the Seattle Kraken, then he goes to the Red Wings and does the same thing. I mean, a lot of people say he's not that good defensively. He's not bringing that. He's just a shooter. He's just a scorer, which, I mean, is that a bad thing? I don't know. I mean, on Tocchet team, maybe it is. But I think it's a guy, they're going to be able to fix that. I don't know how bad defensively he really is, but it's a guy that can just put the puck in the net, which is what you need. And a lot of people are saying maybe he'll play with Pettersson and DeBrusk to start on the second line. And, well, who does Pettersson need? A shooter that just shoots when he gets a puck. And Mikheyev wasn't that. You can get a guy like Sprong who'll be able to put the puck in after Pettersson passes the puck to him. That's, I think, is going to be good for everyone involved. So I like the Sprong signing. I mean, it's very low risk. So it doesn't work out, he's gone next season. And if it works out, great. And then he re-signs And I don't know if he'll resign because then you'll get a lot more money. But I like the Sprong signing. I think it's going to really pay off.
And the most recent move that they made, Sammy Blais, they bring him in on a PTO.
Yeah.
Do you think that's just to kind of give some competition to the training camp? Do you think he has a good shot? What are your thoughts?
I think it's again just a bring in, just see what he does. He's been pretty good in the NHL over his time in St. Louis and twice. Uh, and where else was he? I know he was in
He was
St.
in the
Louis. The
Rangers.
Rangers was the other
Yeah.
team. Yeah, I know he came back to the Blues and he was pretty effective for them in the last season that he was there. And I mean, he's a guy that if he doesn't sign, well, they can maybe put him on in the AHL and see what he can do there, and then bring him up later on. He's, I think he was signed to an AHL deal, and we'll see what he does for NHL, but. I think he's a good, just a depth move. And if he does well in training camp, they probably will sign him later on. But there's not a lot of space on the roster right now. But I mean, who knows? I mean, you never know what he could do in training camp, and they could just sign him.
They signed one more player that I want to ask you about, and this is more of I have a personal liking for this player, Nathan Smith. So he was selected by the Winnipeg Jets. He didn't want to sign with the Jets, so he got traded to the Coyotes. And 14 games in 2 years. And he was pretty solid in the AHL for 2 seasons, with 58 points in 124 games. Not terrible. Do you think he just adds organizational depth, AHL player, or do you think he might have a shot?
I think right now it's more depth. AHL guy can play in the top six in Abbotsford and be a good call-up option. But again, training camp can dictate things, and if he impresses, he might beat out a guy for a fourth line spot and then make some decisions very tough on management, which is what training camp is for. Um, Alvin and Rutherford haven't been shy about putting guys on waivers in the past to bring some guys of these in. And so, but right now, I think he was signed for depth, and we'll see. It's in his hands to see what else he comes from it. But he'll be one of the first call ups if forwards get hurt, I think.
Yeah, I agree. The last forward that was a moving piece is Vasily Podkolzin went to Edmonton for a fourth round pick. I don't know if you've gotten the chance to really talk about your thoughts on the Hockey Writers YouTube channel, but you just want to give your quick thoughts on that too.
I gave it a little bit on Prospect Corner a bit, but I mean, Podkolzin, I didn't like the deal. I feel like they just a fourth round pick. I mean, for a guy that was drafted in the top of the draft, and then you get a fourth round pick for him. I feel like it's too low. But then he wasn't probably going to make the team, and if they would have had to put him on waivers, then well, guess what? Someone's going to pick him up, and then they get nothing for him. So it's like they saw kind of maybe saw the writing on the wall. It's like, well, he's probably not going to do, and we're going to probably have to put him on waivers. So let's get something for him. And Edmonton was, of course, looking for guys to kind of replace who they knew they were going to lose Holloway most likely. So they got Podkolzin to kind of fill it in. So I don't like the deal. I feel like Podkolzin has a lot more potential, but maybe he was taking too long to kind of develop that in Vancouver, and we'll see what he does in Edmonton. I mean, ultimately, the Canucks are probably going to lose him anyway on waivers. I maybe made my peace with it now. I didn't like it at the time, but for now, it's I get why it was done.
Yeah, it's hard to lose a 10th round or 10th overall pick for a fourth round pick. But you also can't keep a player that doesn't deserve a roster spot just because you can't waive him.
Yeah.
So it had to be done unless he showed up to camp and did very good, which that's what I would have done. I would have waited until at least like camp started to see what shape he's in and all this. But then again, you don't have the leverage to make a trade at all because you're gonna have to waive him. So
Yeah.
I get both sides of the argument. Moving on to defense, the Canucks bring in Oilers defenseman Vincent Desharnais. What are your thoughts on bringing him in? 2 years at $2 million. That's a bit steep in my opinion, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
It is a little pricey. I mean, they were, of course, in on Zadorov. They wanted him back. But he was, of course, really pricey. He was too much money. And he seemed to want to go to Boston. So it's not a guy that I think the Canucks had any real chance of re-signing. So they kind of got a guy that'll replace his size, at least. Not the same type of defenseman at all. I mean, his size is probably the only similarity. But I mean, yes, they're both physical at defensemen too. But I think Desharnais is just a real poor man's Zadorov, and they kind of brought him in. He was okay in Edmonton. I wasn't really blown away with whatever he did, but he was a good depth guy. I mean, he's not going to play a lot of minutes in Vancouver. He'll be on the penalty kill. He'll play on the bottom pairing. But you could be surprised and see him do well, because Adam Foote and Sergei Gonchar have done wonders with any defensemen that have come in here. And I'm really optimistic that they can maybe bring a bit more out of this guy, because he does have that size and he does have that ability to be a good defensive defenseman and bring a lot to the penalty kill. So I'm reserving judgment. I didn't like the money at the time. I would have liked Zadorov to come back, but in the sense, it's like, didn't seem like that was in the cards. So Desharnais may be a good consolation. We'll see how he does.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same thing with Foote and Gonchar, as well as Tocchet. I think those three are the three best people you can have in your corner for a guy like Desharnais who wants to thrive. But heading back to Boston, Derek Forbort gets a contract, 1 year, 1.5 million.
This one's a really, I mean, Forbort used to be a really good, I don't know if he's not bad now, but when he was in LA, he was probably one of their best defensemen. And he goes to Boston and he was pretty good. He was injured most of the year last season, so he wasn't bringing as much as he was in his previous season. So if he's healthy now, he's really liked coming to Vancouver here. I think he's going to be a good top four guy. Again, brings good penalty killing, blocking shots. He brings all those abilities that, again, Foote and Tocchet and Gonchar on their defense. So, and he's mobile too. He's not a slow defenseman. He probably won't bring a ton of offense, but I think he's better than Ian Cole in fact of mobility and the ability to move the puck. So I think he's going to be good. Again, reserving judgment on it, but at this point, I think he just fits. Again, a guy that'll fit in with what the Canucks are doing right now.
Yeah, and I think he's a really good depth option. I mean, he was kind of a seventh defenseman in Boston for the last few years, but it's all about the system fit. Somebody can go from a top four defenseman to a seventh defenseman, just all based on what works best for the team, and that's kind of where Derek Forbort slides in. He could thrive in a bigger role, but he also makes a great 6'7" defenseman. So, yeah. Moving on to the Canucks hot topic of the week, last couple of weeks is goaltending. There's a lot going on. So as of right now, Thatcher Demko is injured with some sort of knee injury that can't be solved with surgery. It's something he's going to have to live through and learn to play through. Eerily reminds me of the Carey Price injury that ended his career. Not to burst your bubble there if you had high hopes, but it's also very common for goaltenders to just have things to deal with throughout their career. Hopefully this is the latter. What are your thoughts on the current? And of course they have Silovs as well, who is also dealing with a bit of an injury, but it doesn't sound like it's going to carry into training camp in the start of the season. What are your thoughts on the tandem that they are going to be running with? I mean, they also just offered Kevin Lankinen a contract, but he declined it. I assume they're going to revisit that. That's their best option at the moment. But where do you sit with where the Canucks sit right now in terms of goaltending?
I'm a little worried about Demko. The thing is it was something that has gone back to last season and there's been stuff coming out. Maybe they rushed him back. He probably shouldn't have played the last few games of the season and the playoffs, the first game of the playoffs. That he pushed himself too hard to come back, and that's why he's hurt still now. I don't know any truth to that at all, but the thing is, and then Ian Clark is now not the goaltending coach anymore. He was moved up in the organization to a scout and a development coach. There's speculation that why he moved there because of something with Demko too. Again, this is all speculation. There's nothing really concrete on that, but I'm a little worried with this injury because if it's a nagging thing, when is he going to be healthy? Is he ever going to be 100% healthy again? And that was again, I was thinking about the same thing with Carey Price, that Price had to retire early because of this type of injury. And if Demko has the same thing, his career may be cut short too, which is unfortunate because he's right in his middle of his prime. He's probably healthy. He's one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. And he really hasn't shown a lot, hasn't been able to show that full seasons yet because of these multiple different injuries, knee injury, hip, uh, groin, all this stuff that seems like a lot of goaltenders deal with. But if it's something that he can actually manage, then it's okay. But that was what they were trying to do with Carey Price too, and see if he can manage through it. Never was able to. So we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic that he can get through it. Right now, the Canucks have a pretty good backup option in Silovs with how he played in the playoffs. But you don't know how he's going to hold up over a season. If he's going to have to be the starter all season, I'm not really sure about that right now. I really want the Canucks to sign someone else just to have that kind of good veteran guy. Langton would be a great option. Even Antti Ranta would be another one that I would be okay with bringing in. But I'm hoping Demko just comes back and is fine. Right now it's fine. Short term, Shilov's being the starter. Look we did in the playoffs. So I'm cautiously optimistic on the tandem. Ideally, it's a great tandem if they're both healthy.
Yeah, I wonder if they look at the New Jersey Devils as a trading partner. Like I wonder if they look at Nico Dawes, or I guess they traded Akira Schmid to Vegas, so they don't have him anymore. But one of those teams that have two good young backup caliber goaltenders, just to bring another body in. I wonder if they trade like a mid-round pick for that.
Yeah. Or Alex Lyon from the Red Wings. I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alex Lyon is going to be their go-to guy.
True. Yeah, they got so many goalies in Detroit, though.
Yeah,
Like...
I think Ville Husso would be a more realistic available target from Detroit, but he comes with $4 million cap hit.
That's true. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Them signing Cam Talbot was just so weird.
It is weird.
But yeah, we're going to move into some quick fire questions here. So whether you want to approach this from the biggest storyline or the biggest question mark, what's the number one thing you're keeping an eye on throughout this season?
Well, to start is the goaltending situation of who's going to start, how long Demko's out, if Shilov's going to have to be the starter for a while. I think the goaltending is the biggest storyline going into training camp at this point. Throughout the season, it's Elias Pettersson. Can he bounce back to the play? Like, I hesitate to say bounce back because the thing is he had 89 points last season, but he was not good after January. Most likely because of that nagging injury that he had. So if he's healthy and he's okay, then he's a 100-point guy. If he can click with DeBrusk, there's another question mark. We'll see if he can click with some new line mates for the first time in a while because he's been stuck with Mikheyev for the last couple seasons. And then with a rotating cast beside him. I guess Höglander has been a pretty common line mate for him too, but it's going to be interesting, I think, for how Pettersson kind of rebounds. And this is his first year of his big, massive $11 million contract now. So yeah, I think that's going to be hanging over him too. So hopefully he can rise to the occasion. I think that's the biggest thing right now.
Yeah, and I think his game took a little bit of a step back when Elias Lindholm came in as well, just because there's less of a load off him. And while Lindholm wasn't fantastic in Vancouver, it was just the two of them kind of made up two parts of a whole there. They both played fine in their roles. You would like to see more out of both of them.
Yeah.
All right. Give me a breakout star. Who's going to be the biggest breakout player on the team?
This is tough because there's so many guys that broke out last season for the Canucks.
Is there any left?
There's not any. I'm going to go with a newcomer. I'm going to go with Daniel Sprong. I feel like he's going to turn into a 25 goal scorer here, especially if he plays more in the top six. It's going to be interesting to see why he's been good is because of the low ice time. If he gets more ice time, is he going to be as good? I don't know, but I feel like he's going to be one of those breakout guys that's going to be able to score more than what he's done before and become more of a star than he has been on other teams.
For me, it's got to be Jake DeBrusk. I think
Yeah, it'd be another
he's going to
one.
be in a great position to hit 60 to 70 points for the first time in his career. I think that's very realistic for him. Um, so who needs to bounce back from last year? You kind of touched on Elias Pettersson there. Is he your answer for this, or do you have a different one?
I don't want to, because Pedersen, I look at his points and it's like, what bounce back? Turn back into his 100-point self. I think that's the biggest bounce back you can hope for him. But and again, there's not a lot of guys. Again, how many guys had bad seasons last season? There weren't that many.
You could
And the
say
guys
Hronik
that
from the
did,
second half.
yeah, maybe, yeah. I mean, Hronik probably would be a good one. He still finished with some good point totals. And the guys that I would say to bounce back aren't with the team anymore. So I mean, it's kind of tough to pick one. So I'm gonna go with I'm gonna say Hronik because I think he needs to be good all season. He can't just drop off after the first half and become basically a shell of what he was because he's put up like no points after like half the season. Most of his points were done in the first half. So and now he's under a big contract, the big extension. So he's got to show more throughout the season. So I'll go with Hronik on the bounce back.
Okay, what about the X Factor? Who's going to be the biggest game changer of the year?
It's really easy to go with Quinn Hughes because he was an X factor last season. I think he's going to be that again. So I'm going to go with Quinn Hughes. One guy he said in his interview that was a couple days ago. He says he feels like he has more to give. I'm like, you were almost a 100-point defenseman. How much more can you? But that's great to see because he thinks he can still be better. He feels he can score more. And he's been working on that all off season. Perfecting his shot, perfecting where he shoots the puck. And he wants to be a 20-goal scorer this season. So if he puts up 20 goals and puts up the same amount of assists, he's a 100-point defenseman. So he says, I don't know about the 100 points, but I'm like, if you put up 20 goals and you put up your 80 assists, you're getting 100 points. So in no other words, he was saying he was going to be a 100-point defenseman. So I think he's still the biggest X factor on the Canucks because he's just such a game changer out there. And I love watching Hughes play. So I mean, he's going to be the biggest X factor for sure.
He's one of the most dynamic players in the NHL, and I mean, if it wasn't for Cale Makar, he would be far and away.
Yeah.
Like the gap between 1 and 2 is not that big for defensemen. The gap between 2 and the rest of the league is gigantic at this point. Even Adam Fox, who is
Yeah.
an incredible defenseman, is far behind Quinn Hughes at the moment.
Agree.
Give me one young player, whether it's going to be a rookie or a prospect or whoever coming into the lineup that's going to make a big impact.
I don't see anyone surprising and making it out of camp because the guys that could, I feel they shouldn't. And that's like Lekkerimaki. If he plays like out of his mind in training camp and really impresses, he has to force out a veteran because the guys that are ahead of him are going to be Neil Zoman, like guys like that. He's not gonna be able to be a top 6 guy right off the bat unless he unseats a Daniel Sprong or a Hoglander or those guys like that. So I'm gonna say no one because I don't see a surprise unless Lekkerimaki is my choice. If for a surprising pick, but I don't see it. No, I don't see anyone really surprised at doing it because they have to waive someone or trade someone. And it doesn't seem like they're one of those teams right now that pushes young guys into the lineup. So Lekkerimaki is probably going to play in the AHL most of the season.
Yeah, most likely. And with a player like Lekkerimaki, he's going to do best in the top 6 in the NHL. And he's not just going to have that handed to him, but like bottom 6 in the NHL is just not where he's going to fit in this year. So even if there is a hole open on the third line, there's options that you would rather see in there. He's going to develop so much better in a more offensive role than in a bottom 6. So is Lekkerimaki going to be the prospect that you think fans should be watching this season?
He's the biggest one. I think Tom Willander is, of course, a guy I want to watch, or everyone should be watching in the NCAA again in his second season because he had a really good freshman year, and he's going to sophomore, and see how much more he can build his game. Because that doesn't sound like the Canucks are going to rush him into the NHL. They want him to play in NCAA. And of course, a lot of those guys want to play out most of their college career. So, but watch him, because he's going to, when he makes it to the NHL, he's going to be a top pairing defenseman, and hopefully alongside Quinn Hughes, because I think that's going to be a heck of a pairing. So Villander's another guy to watch. And of course, Lekharmaki's going to get top line minutes in Abbotsford. He's going to get tons of chances to produce. So those two for sure.
Yeah, the Canucks have some sneaky good prospects. I mean, like when you think of the best prospect pools in the league, the Canucks aren't in that conversation, and they shouldn't be. But they're high end guys. They've got some pretty good ones, especially if you still consider Silovs a prospect.
Yeah,
so
he's still borderline. He'll graduate at the end of this season.
Yeah. All right. I think I already know your answer for defense. But who is going to lead the team in scoring for the forwards and then the defense?
So forwards, I'm not going JT Miller this time. I'm going Elias Pettersson, because I really see him producing back, or reverting back to the guy that had the 100-point season a couple seasons ago. He'll be healthy all season, I hope, and be able to, but it'll be very close. Miller's going to be there, but I think Pettersson's going to just slightly edge him out. And then, of course, Quinn Hughes.
Yeah,
there's no one else.
There's
no one else.
Yeah.
He's gonna be a 100-point defenseman, I think, this season, and yeah, he'll lead. He could even lead the team in scoring. I don't know.
I would put money down on him leading the team. But yeah, so give me one hot take, or bold prediction, or something along those lines for the Canucks.
All right, my bold prediction is oh my gosh. See, I've got a couple. So I'm going to go with Brock Boeser. He's going to have a 45-goal season. And again, another 40-goal season, but closing him more on the 50 goals, because I feel like he's just kind of turned the corner now, and he's just figured out how to score. So consistently and stay healthy. So I'm going to go with Boeser getting I'll go one better. He'll be a 50-goal scorer. There's your bold. 50 goal score for 50 goals for Boeser. And then I'm going to say JT Miller is going to be another 100 points. I don't know if that's a bold prediction, because
that's not very bold.
I mean, he's only had his 100-point season. Can he do it again?
Yeah, that's true.
I guess could be a big thing, but the bold prediction is the 50 goals for Boeser.
Yeah, I think NHL fans just across the league are like 50-50 divided on whether last year was an outlier for Boeser, or if he's able to do that, because he did take that next step. So I'm really excited to see how he does this year.
And problem is, 50 goals means a ton of more money on his next contract. So there's another question that's going to go throughout the season.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Matthew, thanks for joining me, or me joining you, however that works. But yeah, tune in tomorrow for another season preview on the Hockey Writers YouTube channel.